Terrific. All right, excellent. And we have with us next to continue this conversation around what some of the trends are in coming out of Vive and HIMSS, certainly, and how life sciences were a part of both of those meetings is Angela Radcliffe, who is the enterprise digital lead with Bristol Myers Squibb. Angela, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me. Really exciting to hear some of the content that's been shared today, and lots of good insights, lots of stuff that's going to help us decide what do we do next, how do we move forward in digital health. So thanks for having us.
It's fantastic. And give people a little bit of background about what you do at BMS.
Sure. So I lead the enterprise digital innovation practice under our global digital strategy. And what that really means is I interlock with our functional business leads, whether it's in R&D or commercial or our global supply chain, to figure out how we want to innovate across the entire ecosystem. And that means working with our external partners, whether it's VC, startups, our internal business development function, whether that is working on experimenting with new and unique things, whether it's sensors or data. And it also means working to support our digital health, around the pill, beyond the pill, digital medicines and digital therapeutics practice, which is the other half of my team.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. Yeah, and there's a lot going on there for sure. And from the standpoint of what some of your observations from Vive and HIMSS, and tell us a little bit about those.
Sure. So it's interesting, right? Of course, BMS attends a number of different conferences throughout the year, whether it's a medical congress in one of our therapeutic areas, or whether it is these types of learning events, right? And so obviously this being the first year for Vive, do any of us really know how to say it? We were curious to know how would it differentiate from conferences like HIMSS or Health, or some of the niche conferences we go to in specific areas like CNS Summit. And so we decided in this instance to take our digital health team, as well as some of our team from business development, to check it out. One of the draws was, of course, the Startup Health Festival, because we're always looking for the new and the next, and the Startup Health Festival is always a great place for us to sort of discover that, have conversations with partners. But we were trying to suss out, how's this going to be different for us than coming to JPM? How's this going to be different than coming to HIMSS? How's this going to be different from South by? And I had the benefit of attending back-to-back this conference and South by, so I didn't get the chance to go to HIMSS. So we sent other team members there. And I found it to be really a unique audience for pharma. So, when we think about the healthcare ecosystem and where pharma plays in that, and where we want to partner and work, of course, payers and health systems are a critical part of our stakeholder landscape. And this meeting was really tailored to them versus, say, health, that we find to be much more tailored to pharma. And that was super unique in that sometimes, we walk the floor, we meet with partners, and there's an agenda that's very central to what we're working on. In this instance, the VCs were there, the startup partners were there, and there was a great showing. I would actually say this was a worthy exhibit hall to walk. I had really good, meaningful conversations, but pharma wasn't the star of the show. And that was so refreshing, right? Because it let us focus on what we came there for, instead of really having to focus on promoting our own agenda.
Yeah, I think that's the key. And it talks a lot about what Roxy was just talking about, right? In terms of co-creation and really finding things that are more than an inconvenience, that are truly adding value, which are fundamental. And I think a lot of folks have really begun to see that now in some of the startups that we're really seeing grow and get scale. So, when you're thinking about these programs and certainly the conferences that you've been to, did you go to South by as well, I think, right?
Yeah, I went to South by back to back. And, one of the similarities between the two was there was a heavy focus on tequity, equity, access, diversity, and inclusion. And these are topics that we all should have been talking about more. And to see them take center stage at two of the most prominent conferences that we show up to, that was important. It was refreshing. And quite frankly, it was nice to hear different content, because I think, as referred to on the previous discussion and some others today, we've heard the same content over and over and over again. It's time that we start to change the conversation, push the dialogue forward, and create a new environment for co-creating solutions among all of the providers in the ecosystem.
That's great. What was one of the sessions that really caught your eye at any of those 3 meetings that you've been to over the last 30 days?
Yeah, I mean, 2 really struck my attention at Viv. One was an AI panel that was with Closed Loop, with DeLorean AI, with AWS. And there were just some really interesting insights about how we have been using AI in healthcare and how maybe we should be thinking about it differently. And a real focus on something that's, I'm personally passionate about, which is the bias that is going to creep up and exist within AI and how we can go about doing that, doing AI, using AI for its full power, but in true recognition of the unintended consequences we could face. And the other one that was really fascinating to me, and Jonathan Bush never disappoints, neither does Tina Joros from Allscripts, and they did a great session with a couple others on fire and whether, fire is on fire or whether it would, sort of disappear. And my big takeaway there was, hey, let's stop trying to, if HL7, et cetera, is still working, stop trying to rewrite that. Let's focus on fire for new use cases. Let's find the killer apps and let's democratize data for patients, which was part of the intent behind it. So really great session, super enthusiastic discussion. And I always like to hear that kind of debate.
Yeah, I think that as we're looking at, especially the session we just had with the Chief Information Security Officer at New York Presbyterian, it's very clear that FHIR and other types of encrypted messaging platforms are critical now that we have this new kind of geopolitical circumstance that we're facing with Russia and certainly the war in Ukraine. And when we've got about 2 minutes left, Angela, what else would you like to add in here as we wrap up the your insights on what you saw within the VIVE and the HIMSS conferences?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll throw a sort of a provocative post-COVID question out for people to ponder on after I hang up and we transition to the next session. And that is, do we already have enough of these conferences? Are we adding another one for a niche audience and that has value because we're tailoring the content better? Or are we creating more of those silos that we don't want to see in healthcare? So how do we get away from sort of the overwhelming sessions that apply to all? I know, DIA went down that path for a while and HIMSS certainly has, had its own proliferation. So how do we find that balance, right? And how do we make sure that when we're spending our time in person and these valuable, one-on-one interactions, we're doing it inclusive of the entire ecosystem and not having a JPM conversation, a HIMSS conversation, a health conversation, a VIVE conversation. And so we'll be looking at that really closely and trying to figure out how we maximize the value of those in-person meetings again, now that we're back. So thanks for including me, Stan. I look forward to the rest of the seminar.
Great insights. And again, thank you, Angela. Appreciate your time today.
Take care.